So the previous video ended with this slide where we looked at the elasticity or inelasticity of certain products. So let's quickly just recap this first graph where we see the price of a product has changed. It was first quite expensive, then the price dropped, and now all of a sudden more of this product gets sold because more people usually want to buy more cheap things. So whatever this product was, it is price elastic. So when the price changed, the demand also changed, and here we see that the curve of the graph, it's quite slanted. So this graph then represent the fact that as the price changed, more was sold. So this product is price elastic, whereas on this side you get a price inelastic product. So here, even though the price actually dropped quite a bit, the amount sold did change, but not as drastic as, say, on this side. Unfortunately, this graph, we have to have values to actually see the big difference. The fact that not a lot of things more were sold. It kind of looks misleading, but basically what the slant of the graph kind of is trying to tell you guys is that as the price here dropped, the quantity sold didn't change that much. So that's why this graph, the line graph itself, is much more slanted or much more vertical than, say, the one in this one. So this product then would be priced inelastic, meaning that the price or the demand itself didn't change that much. So now we're going to look at certain factors that affect elasticity of demand itself. So the first one they mentioned there is the nature of the product. So meaning your luxury items versus your necessities. Usually your necessities and your essentials. Essentials here they give like food, and necessities is something like a fridge to keep your food from spoiling. So these things is things you actually do need to buy a lot of, no matter the price. Yes, fine, you'll buy a cheaper fridge rather than an expensive one. But these are items that you would need to buy because, again, without them we can't survive. So no matter the price, we'll buy it. So these two examples would be then price inelastic examples. We do need food to survive. So then things like your luxury items, like high-heeled shoes. Let's be honest, ladies, we don't really need to walk with it. We can walk normally with tekkies or flats. So this is definitely not needed that much. So it's actually price elastic. So for this item, if it was very, very cheap, more of them will sell. But if it's very, very expensive, less people will buy it. So it's definitely price elastic. It depends on the price, whether there is demand for it. Then secondly, I think the availability of a substitute product definitely influences, meaning even if you're going to get a high heel shoe, but there is different makes of it. So instead of getting the only luxury item I know of clothing is Dolce & Gabbana. So instead of buying that, you can rather just buy a cheap version of the shoe. So if there is a substitute available, you'd rather go for the cheap option. So that can change your demand for something, meaning you're going to buy less of the fancy stuff. Then thirdly, the portion of the consumer's budget, meaning if the customer only has a certain amount of money to spend, he will not buy the luxury item because he only has so much money. So the budget of the buyer actually does determine the demand. Then lastly, the time period of the year or the season. So in the winter time, generally we don't buy summer clothes. We rather buy winter clothes because it's cold, and if we can't keep our arms and our legs warm, we will freeze. So the time of year also plays a part in what type of product we buy, whether we really need it, will the demand be there, or will there be no demand. Then we need to talk about market equilibrium. So if you guys can remember from this graph, you've got your supply curve, the one going upwards, because as the price increases, the quantity sold or the quantity you want to sell increases. So it's directly related. Then this one would be the demand curve. As the price goes up, the quantity sold actually goes down. Okay, sorry, that's that way. So meaning as the price increases, the quantity you sell actually decreases, but as the price decreases, the demand increases. So it's kind of confusing, but as this graph goes down, it shows the quantity increases, and when you get to this point, the price is also very low. So as price decreases, demand increases, vice versa as well. So the market equilibrium is basically then where your demand curve and your supply curve meet right here in the middle. So the letter E here represents equilibrium. What this means is is that both your supplier and the person demanding to buy something, they agree on this specific price. So here's where the price is equal and where the quantity supplied and demanded is equal. So this is your sweet spot. For example, if this was to sell ice cream and the ice cream can be sold at R2 here, people will actually buy it. There's a certain amount they will buy, and there's a certain amount the supplier then will be willing to supply. Both of the different parties, they agree on this price. So both the price and the quantity sold or available is the same here at market equilibrium. So this graph shows you what happens if maybe there's too much of a product available or too little of a product available. So it's the same graph, supply up here, demand going down, and this example is actually of ice cream cones being sold. So in this graph right here is if, let's say, here's a R2 example, here's the equilibrium, but let's say the supplier actually wants to make more money. So they will be willing to sell 10 more of these ice creams, but then they want 2.5 Rand. They want more money, obviously, for the more quantity you can sell because they want to make more profit. But at the same point where they want to sell 10 ice cream cones, in reality, the demand will only be for 4. At 2.5 Rand, people are only willing to buy 4. So remember, the demand goes down then when the price increases. So what happens here in this the triangle forming here in between the two lines is basically a surplus. So there's going to be too much ice cream cones. There's 10 ice cream cones here waiting to be sold, but only 4 will get sold because only 4 people, or maybe one person buying 4 cones anyway, is willing to pay 2.5 Rand. So meaning there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ice cream cones are too many. So there'll be 6 left that doesn't get sold. So then the supplier ends up with a surplus. So this area right here where the demand is too low and the supply is too high, you end up with a surplus. Then the opposite can also be true. Maybe now the ice cream cones are so good, but the demand now falls down here to they want to buy the ice cream cones for 1.5 Rand, but people say they're willing to buy 10, but it must be 1.5 Rand. Now the supplier, remember, will be losing money. So at 1.5 Rand, he is only able or willing to sell 4 ice cream cones for 1.5 Rand. So again, the demand is for 10, there's only 4 available, so right here you'll have a shortage. So 6 ice cream cones are needed to fulfill this demand, but there's only 4. So right at the bottom here, there'll be a shortage then of this product. So what's going to happen in the exam, they can either give you this graph, you still have to identify what's this curve, what's that curve, and then they can ask you at this point, the equilibrium point, and then ask you what happens at the top here. You just have to remember the word surplus, and what happens at the bottom here is going to be a shortage. Or they can ask you in a definition format, meaning what happens if there is too much product available and nobody buys it, a surplus. What happens if the demand is too high and there's not enough product, then there is a shortage. Okay, then quickly just what happens when there is a shift in the supply curve. Mainly this is when, again, if there's a shift in supply, something happens, there's not enough supplied of a product, or maybe there's too little of a product supplied. So what are some factors that can cause this? Changes in the production cost. Maybe it costs now too much to produce, let's say, apple pie or whatever you're producing. So now there is less of that product because the production costs are too high. Or it could be too low, or whatever happens there, you can change it. And secondly, improved technology. In parentheses here, efficient production. So meaning, if you have, this is orchard farm, you're farming apples, and now the farmer has maybe more qualified laborers to help pick the apples, or maybe he's got a machine now to actually help him shake off the apples and catch them gently. So he's using better technology. Find that the machine maybe costs a lot of money, so that can also be a factor. But now he is harvesting the apples twice as fast as people doing it. So that can also maybe shift the supply chain either in the favor of the seller or maybe against not in favor. So it depends. That's what's going to change it. And lastly, industry growth or shrinkage. Here, the example of the shrinkage could be maybe factories closing down. Maybe the factories that change the apples into apple pie, or maybe making canned apples. I don't think we have that anyway, but canned factories. If they close, again, there will be a shortage of supplies of these canned foods. So that can also shift the supply. So what's going to happen? you still have your demand curve right here. Nothing happens to it because people still want this product, whatever it is. Their demand never changed. So over here you have the original equilibrium. So this was the supply curve. At a certain price, a certain quantity was available, but now something happens and it shifts to the right in this one. So when it shifts to the right, the price will decrease, and the quantity then of this product sold will actually also increase, meaning that when it changes or the supply curve moves to the right, supply increases. So now more of this product is available. So why did the price actually decrease on this curve? Because now more things are available, and technically someone will have to make the price of this product more cheaper, otherwise there is going to be a surplus. So to prevent a surplus, we usually your businesses and so on, they lower the price of a product so that more can be sold at a lower price. People are more willing to, again, buy cheaper things. So at a lower price, all of these things will be sold and there won't be a surplus and there won't be a shortage. So that's the point of equilibrium. Usually businesses, they don't want to break even, they want to make a profit, but it's better to be able to sell all your product instead of having a demand or a shortage. So if it were to, also in the same breath, if the supply curve were to move to the left, you'll have, again, less available to sell, then the price would actually increase, because as it moves up and down along the demand curve, your price, if the new equilibrium is there, the price will be higher, and the quantity sold will be less, because again, people don't want expensive stuff. Okay, so when it moves to the left, your supply curve, it's when there's less available to be sold. When it moves to the right, there's too much to be sold, or more available to be sold. Then same thing with the demand curve, it can also change. So some factors that does change it is consumer income. So again, if there's less money for people to be able to spend, they'll be less interested in buying something because it will be too expensive for them. Then also their preferences or their taste can change. Maybe again, people don't want Nike shoes, they now want Adidas shoes. So they stop buying Nike. Then also population size and composition, meaning there's only so many people in the country. If something happens and our population decreases or increases, there could be a shortage or a surplus, I'm getting lost in the words, or a surplus of something to be sold. So again, if there's less people, less things will be sold, there'll be less demand. If there's more people, there'll be a higher demand. Then also changes in the prices of related goods, so meaning substitutes and complements there in between parentheses. Again, if you have more Nike shoes available that is cheaper than Adidas, more people will buy. Can't remember whether I gave the first example. More Nike shoes then will be sold. If there's more Nike available at a cheaper price, they will sell. Nobody will want the Adidas, for example. So on the curve, what will happen? And again, in the exam, they will give you the graph, and then the change will happen on the graph, and then you have to interpret it. So it's basically what they're going to ask you guys. So supply here stays the same in this case, but now the demand has shifted. So same thing. When the demand firstly shifts to the right, that's the right side, and this which has shifted. When it shifts to the right, demand has increased. So more of this product, they want more of this product to be sold, but if the demand, say, were to change to the left or move to the left downwards, the demand has decreased for whatever reason. So again, in this case, because it went to the right side, the curve moved to the right, here's my arrow, price now has increased because more people want to buy something, and also more of them get sold. So actually when demand moves to the right, it's actually very good for the supplier, because now he'll get people are willing to pay more for his or her product, and they buy more of it. So this is actually quite good for your supplier, unless maybe this causes, again, a shortage. Then it's quite bad. But generally, this could be a good thing as long as your equilibrium stays the same. Okay, so in this case, there won't be a shortage or a surplus. Okay, so these are the last two slides are just quickly some things, again, that get shifted. Here they show just for demand, what can increase demand. Again, the taste preferences change. Maybe you want new things. Population maybe also likely to buy. Population likely to buy rises, so meaning more people buy something, whatever it is. People have more money to spend. Third thing there. Fourth thing, the price of the substitute rises, so maybe now the As if people want to buy Nike, maybe the Nike now becomes too expensive, they drop that, and more people now buy their Adidas, and the Adidas are the thing here that was being sold, for example. So substitute complements, same thing, one maybe falls, rises, whatever. And yeah, future expectations encourage the buying of this product. So there's just a couple of examples there. Again, in this case, the demand moves to the right, so demand increases. So what happens when demand decreases, going to the left? Also, the taste and preferences changes, and all the same reasons actually apply to this as well, but this in case the income drops, so less people want something specifically, that's why it decreases the demand. Substitute maybe also changes, maybe now again the other product, the Adidas, is more expensive, and say the Nike is more cheaper, so now less people buy Adidas, so then it goes to the left. Okay, so that's it for this video.